Hey, it's Harmony again. I have to say, I was completely amazed by the response to the first video in this series. If you haven't seen the first video, it's linked in the description. People were asking in the comments about the document I shared with my players and also about my Twitter account, both of which are linked in the video description this time. The document was written for my players and may not be applicable to all groups, so I encourage you to look it over if you intend on running this sort of game and copy the bits you like. If you haven't seen the first video, I recommend you watch that before this one, otherwise nothing will make sense. In this video, I want to talk about what happened in the Braunstein portion of the game, as well as the players' receptions to the approaches taken. When they showed up to the first session of the Braunstein after creating their gods, many of the players had been speaking to each other over the week about their god and their relations. They had decided on the start of a creation story. And let me actually get their gods up here. Okay, this is my terrible handwriting, but it kind of explains every god, kind of, if you can decipher that. Uh, but anyway, their creation story was that the god of war and time, so Kamaris, the one down here, Kamaris, I'm going to circle that. That's allegedly a circle. They decided that the god of war and time was there at the very beginning of everything. And after him came the dual mother goddesses, Keperzal and Kriegfi. Keperzal was the light and infernal devil more than a god, and Kriegfi was the god of chaos and arcana. And between them, they birthed the three brothers, Mortir, the god of death and taxes, Vitatheos, the god of life and darkness, not light, and Agnir, the god of forge and spirit. They hadn't fully shared their domains with each other at this point, but some had exchanged some information about their gods since they had decided on relations for them. They were talking about it all week, and some were much freer with their gods' domains than the others who kept them close to their chest. I think going in, everyone knew the domains of Kriegfi, Keperzal, and Mortir, but Agnir, Vitatheos, and Kamaris were a little bit more ambiguous, even though everyone knew Kamaris was the god of time. Another detail that the players had decided upon before the game was the sun. Keperzal, the god of light and infernal domains, had decided that the sun was a whale, and she was actually using the whale tail as the symbol for her goddess. I thought this was a little bit odd, but who am I to argue with a sun devil? When the players arrived, I reviewed with them how this portion of the game would be structured. It would take place in a series of rounds, and each round would represent 300 years. Each round would be broken up into 4 phases, and I will get that up on the screen here for you. Each round would be broken up into 4 phases: the event phase, the diplomacy phase, the planning phase, and the execution phase. The event phase would involve rolling on a chart and a location for the event to occur. I created the chart beforehand, and this would not happen on the first round, but only on subsequent rounds. The events were intended to add an element of uncertainty and drama to the game, and they were intended to be disruptive. The diplomacy phase would be a free-form discussion where players could talk about their plans at will. They were free to say whatever they wanted, and there was a second voice channel set up in case the players wanted to break off or speak privately, and we called that the Betrayal Garden. In the planning phase, each player would pick up to 3 different hexes and execute up to 3 different actions in those hexes. They were free to contradict orders spoken to other players, so lying and deceit was always a possibility. They would submit written orders to me privately, and their actions could be on the same or on multiple hexes. Example actions included things like spawning a new race, creating a settlement, fortifying a settlement, sending armies to attack each other, or molding terrain, and they could get creative with this. The execution phase was where I would execute the orders that they gave to me during the planning phase. I had an incarnate map up, and I had that open the whole time, and I would make changes in real time and then share it with the players when I was done. It would take me about 10 to 15 minutes per round to execute all of the orders. During that time, I would inform players of conflicting orders. Whenever orders conflicted, they may talk it out or there may be a roll, but there would have to be some form of resolution to conflicting orders. Most of the players spawn different races on the first round. I made them use one of their 3 actions per round to spawn a race, but if I could do it again, I might let each player spawn a non-human race and then use it as the full array of playable races in the game. So this time I told them that they would need to spawn the races they wanted to see in the world, and the only races that would exist to start were the humans. I split the humans up into 2 populations and put some of them in the north and some in the south. So, Creek Fee, the broodmother, spawned the Arachne. They were like this race of chaotic spider people with an aptitude for magic, and they called them the Arachno-capitalists. Vita Theos spawned vampires by infecting some of the humans of the northern region. Kepperzal spawned tieflings of all colors, and they each represented the different levels of the hells. Camaris, the eternal conflict, spawned gnomes of all things. They were skilled warrior gnomes and disciplined in sailing and fighting. Ognir the Soulbrand spawned industrious and psychic dwarves, and Mortier did not spawn a race of his own, but instead he took the role of a god of the inevitable universal truths. He pulled followers from all races of people in the world, though many of his followers were human. You may have already noticed this, but I'll go ahead and say something about it here. We had an alignment problem. Of all the gods that the players created, Creekthee, Camaris, Ognir, and Mortier were neutral, and Kepperzal and Vita Theos were outright evil. There were no good aligned deities in the world. I considered trying to force a change and asking players to change to good aligned gods, but I decided to let things play out and see what happened. Also, we ended up with a good aligned god later anyway, as we had a player who joined after the initial world creation, so there is at least one now. While I think the players did very well communicating throughout the week, they created quite a bit of lore and a creation story for their gods. Some of them faltered at communication immediately when the game started. Creekthee, Ognir, and Kepperzal all 3 declared their desired zones of influence. Creekthee was in the mountains, Kepperzal was in the volcano, and Ognir was in the other mountains. They all declared that right away. And the other 3 decided to leave their zones of desired influence hidden, and they gave them to me privately. Well, they all gave me this area up north, like all 3 of them. Mortier was up here, Vita Theos was up here, and Camaris was up here. All 3 of them were trying to settle the exact same zones. They didn't talk about this beforehand. We resolved this through a series of rolls, and Vita Theos ended up dominating up north, so there was kind of a vampire scourge working through some of the other northern settlements. As an aside, something I really wish I had made a structure for was initiative order. The order in which the player commands were executed was decided based on the order in which they were received. This is because I had to go through and change them on the map, and it was more efficient to start executing orders first come, first serve. It didn't matter for the most part, but it did matter in circumstances where players were attempting to build in the same spot. If you run something like this, you'll want to think about the initiative order a bit and decide if this is something worth developing a structure for. In the first round, those in the north fought for territory. The gnomes were able to establish a small settlement of sphinxes that were born, and the humans also settled in the north and worshipped Mortier, but as I said, Vita Theos started a vampire scourge that worked its way through all of that. And in the north, it was like all vampires. The 3 in the central region Kriegthi, Keppersall, and Ognir were able to effectively divide territory. And let me see if I can get a better map. That was a little bit later. I think this one here. Yeah, we have the Arachno-capitalists, the dwarves, the tieflings, and then up north, it was just a bloodbath. And you'll notice that all of this area down south was pretty well unsettled. That will be important. So Ognir and the dwarves went for a very turtle-like approach. They settled in the Dwarven Mountains and they continued to fortify every round. They never dealt with anybody, and I probably won't mention them again until the next video because it's a while before they become relevant. I've seen suggestions online since I did this that this game would work best when turtling is somehow disincentivized. But I didn't do anything to disincentivize turtling, and this player ended up just building up and turtling the whole time. Kriegthi and Keppersall, so the spiders and the tieflings down here, they forged an alliance pretty much immediately. The tieflings and the spider people were prepared to protect each other if the war broke out. Keppersall's tieflings found a randomly placed wonder. It was a stormstone. And she immediately ceded it to Kriegthi. So this happened because Keppersall was given the knowledge of where the artifact was, and Kriegthi was given the knowledge of what it did. And I think I might have messed up here and explained it to the tiefling player as if it could have been like a bomb or something. So she was afraid to get it, and she told the spiders where it was in exchange for the spiders telling her what it did. As you may expect, this was a wonderful situation for Kriegthi. So she got a new artifact that basically gave her control of storms as well. And a lot of this was abstract, but it definitely made that god more powerful. The rest of the early game consisted of the gnomes of Conmaris spreading to their own island after Conmaris's early settlements were pretty well destroyed by the vampires. The gnomes did very well on their island and founded a massive maritime city untouched by the underground forces of darkness. Vitatheos dominated the north, turning multiple early settlements into hotbeds of vampirism. The gnomes more or less left and locked down their major city, whereas the humans established a settlement of Vitalis. Most of the humans still worshipped Mortir, but there was a scourge of vampirism that took root in the city as more and more turned to Vitatheos. While everyone fought in the north, no gods claimed presence in the south, which allowed Keppersall and the tieflings to spread unchecked. She created some Dragonborn and Lamia as her own chosen races, and they established some presence in the south as well. And evil forces were basically spreading freely south of the giant volcano. The early game culminated in two major events, the fall of Vitalis and the Scorched Tower. The humans of the north began forsaking all gods after vampirism infected their city Vitalis. They independently established a settlement just north of the Dwarven lands around an enormous tower that they were building to the heavens. This happened because they were fed up with everything going on there. I also rolled a Tower of Babel random event. Keppersall and Vitatheos teamed up to punish the humans. Keppersall sent a ball of fire from the sun to destroy their tower and the humans around it, and Vitatheos dragged the city of Vitalis, named after him and his vampire scourge, down to the Underdark, leaving only a crater behind. The humans of the north were devastated, and they had all been turned to monstrous vampiric creatures of the underground, and their city had been dragged down below. A few survivors began to pilgrimage to the south past the Dwarven lands. As the early game drew to an end, Keppersall's influence was spreading freely in the south. The spiders and the gnomes were sailing the seas, the dwarves were turtled in their mountains, and most of those living in the north had been turned to vampires, and the remaining humans of the north began to head south. The humans of the south were thriving so far and hoping none of the evil gods found them. That's about it for part 2. I don't know if there will be one or two more parts to this, but the next part will focus on the end of the war game portion of the campaign and how the gods will continue to influence the world going forward. Please feel free to comment. It would mean a lot if you like this video. Please sub if you want to see more content like this. I plan to make more videos soon about my thoughts on running games and videos that are less specific to my own campaign, but for now, I just want to share what I'm doing with my players. Thanks, guys!